I still remember the exact moment my world collapsed. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I walked into my boss's office, thinking it was just another performance review. The sympathetic look on his face told me everything before he even opened his mouth. Budget cuts. Downsizing. We have to let you go. Words that hit like punches to the gut. 15 years at the company, gone. Just like that. I sat in my car for almost an hour afterward, staring at nothing, my mind racing with how I'd tell Helen. We had a mortgage, car payments, and the renovation we'd just started on the kitchen. The timing couldn't have been worse. When I finally got home, I found Helen sitting at our dining table, unusually composed. There was a folder in front of her. "We need to talk," she said, not even asking about my day. I thought she somehow knew about the job. I was wrong. So wrong. "I want a divorce," she said, sliding the folder toward me. "I've already filed the papers." The room started spinning. Fired and divorced in the same day? It felt like some cruel joke. "Why?" was all I could manage to say. "We've been growing apart for years, Mark. You know that." Her voice was cold, rehearsed. "I need more than this. More than what you can provide." Those last words stung the most. More than what I could provide. Was that what our 10 years of marriage had come down to? What I could provide? I didn't tell her about losing my job. Something stopped me, maybe pride, maybe shock, or maybe the sudden realization that the woman I'd loved for a decade was looking at me like I was a disappointing investment. That night, as Helen slept in the guest room, I sat in our home office staring at the divorce papers. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Jake. "How'd the review go?" I started typing about the firing, then deleted it. Instead, I wrote, "Helen's divorcing me." His response came immediately. "I'm coming over tomorrow." What I didn't know then was that the universe had a strange twist waiting for me. Because the very next morning, while Helen was out meeting her lawyer, I received a call that would change everything. "Mr. Thompson? This is Gerald Winters from Winters & Associates law firm. I'm calling about your Uncle Robert's estate." Uncle Robert. My mother's eccentric brother who'd disappeared to Europe 20 years ago. The black sheep nobody talked about. "I'm afraid he's passed away," the lawyer continued. "And you're the sole beneficiary of his estate." I sat down, confused. "Estate? What estate?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, your uncle was quite successful in his investments overseas. The estate is valued at approximately $12 million. $12 million. As the lawyer continued explaining details, I noticed Helen's divorce papers still sitting on the table. The timing was almost poetic. She decided I wasn't enough the exact same day I lost my job. And now, less than 24 hours later, I was a millionaire. I thought about calling her immediately, telling her everything. But then I remembered the coldness in her eyes. More than what you can provide. That's when I made a decision that would set everything in motion. I wouldn't tell her about the inheritance. Not yet. What I needed first was someone I could trust completely. Someone who knew both of us and would understand what was really happening. I picked up my phone and called the one person who might be able to help me navigate this mess. "Rachel. It's Mark. I need your help with something complicated." Rachel. Helen's best friend since college. And also one of the city's most ruthless divorce attorneys. Rachel agreed to meet me at a coffee shop across town, somewhere Helen would never go. When she walked in, her face showed the concern I expected. "Mark, what's going on? Helen told me you two were having problems, but divorce? It seems sudden." I took a deep breath. It was sudden. For me, at least. Rachel's expression shifted. "What do you mean?" "She filed the papers yesterday. The same day I got fired from my job." "She filed the day you got fired." Rachel's lawyer instincts were kicking in. "Did she know?" "No. I never got the chance to tell her. She had the papers ready before I could say anything." Rachel sat back, processing this. "That's interesting timing." I nodded, then pushed the envelope I'd brought across the table. "There's something else you should see." She opened it, eyes widening as she read the letter from Gerald Winters. $12 million? Mark, this is life-changing. I know. Does Helen know about this? I shook my head. No one knows except you now. Rachel studied me carefully. Why are you telling me this? I'm her best friend. Because you're also a damn good lawyer who believes in fairness. And because I need to understand what's really happening here. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. The timing of her filing is suspicious. If she'd waited even a day, and you'd told her about losing your job, it would look bad for her in court. Almost like she was abandoning you in a crisis. And if she knew about the inheritance? Rachel's expression hardened. Then the timing would make perfect sense, wouldn't it? That's when the possibility I'd been avoiding hit me full force. What if Helen somehow knew about Uncle Robert? What if this wasn't about growing apart at all? I need to know the truth, Rachel. Before we go any further. Rachel nodded slowly. If I help you with this, it means betraying my best friend. Or it means helping her avoid making a terrible mistake, I countered. If she's leaving because she thinks I can't provide, shouldn't she know the truth before throwing away 10 years? Rachel tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. There's another possibility you're not considering. What's that? That she really does just want out of the marriage, and the timing is coincidental. The thought hurt, but I had to consider it. Then I need to know that too. Rachel finally nodded. Okay, here's what we do. I'll represent you in the divorce proceedings. Won't that be a conflict of interest? Not if Helen has already retained another attorney, which she has. It's unusual, but not prohibited. And it gives us a chance to see how she reacts. To you representing me? To that, and to what we discover during the process. Rachel leaned forward. Mark, divorce proceedings require full financial disclosure from both parties. When your inheritance comes to light, as it legally must, we'll see exactly how Helen responds. And if she tries to claim part of it? Rachel's smile was small but determined. Inheritances are typically considered separate property, not marital assets, especially ones received after filing. But her reaction will tell us everything we need to know about her motives. As we finalized our plan, I felt a strange mix of sadness and anticipation. The woman I'd loved for a decade might have betrayed me in the worst way. Or maybe she was just unhappy, and the timing was cruel coincidence. Either way, I was about to find out. When's the first meeting with her lawyer? Rachel asked. Friday. 3 days from now. Rachel nodded. Perfect. That gives us time to prepare. And Mark. Yeah, don't tell anyone else about the inheritance. Not yet. As I left the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a text from Helen. Hope you've had time to look over the papers. My lawyer says we can make this quick and painless. Quick and painless. Like ripping off a Band-Aid. Like erasing 10 years of marriage. I didn't respond. Friday would come soon enough. The next 3 days were the strangest of my life. I lived in the same house as Helen, ate at the same table, and slept in separate rooms, all while carrying the weight of 2 life-changing secrets. She seemed almost cheerful, making plans for her next chapter, as she called it. Once, I caught her looking at apartment listings in the expensive part of town, on a budget we could never have afforded on our combined salaries. That's when the first real suspicion took root. Rachel and I met twice more to prepare. She dug into Helen's recent activities, credit card statements, phone records, anything we could legally access. She's been meeting with someone named David Keller, Rachel told me during our last prep session. Multiple times over the past month. Who is he? He works at Winters and Associates. The same law firm handling my uncle's estate. The coincidence was too perfect to be coincidental. How would she even know about my uncle? I asked. Rachel shrugged. Family connections. Old photos. Maybe she went looking for potential inheritances. People do strange things when money's involved. Friday morning arrived with a knot in my stomach. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. at her lawyer's office, a sleek downtown firm specializing in high-asset divorces. I picked Rachel up on the way. She wore her sharpest suit and carried a briefcase that probably cost more than my car. Ready? She asked as I pulled up to the building. As I'll ever be. Helen's face when we walked in together was worth every bit of the pain I'd endured that week. Her eyes widened, darting between Rachel and me with growing confusion. Rachel, what are you doing here? Her voice was higher than normal. Rachel smiled professionally. I'm representing Mark in these proceedings. Helen's lawyer, a polished man in his 50s, looked equally surprised. Ms. Chen, this is highly unusual given your friendship with my client. Not prohibited, though, Rachel replied smoothly. And I've filed all the proper disclosures. Helen's face had gone from shock to angry. You can't be serious. Rachel, we've been friends for 15 years. Which is why I want to make sure this process is fair for everyone, Rachel answered calmly. We all sat down at the conference table. Helen kept shooting betrayed looks at Rachel, who maintained perfect professional composure. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Well, let's proceed. We've prepared an initial settlement offer based on the couple's assets and Mrs. Thompson's contributions to the marriage. He slid a document across the table. Rachel picked it up, reviewed it briefly, then passed it to me. The terms were breathtaking in their audacity. Helen wanted the house, both cars, and 60% of our retirement savings, despite the fact that I'd contributed more to all of them. This seems rather one-sided, Rachel commented mildly. Helen's lawyer smiled thinly. My client sacrificed career advancement to support her husband's career. We believe this compensates fairly for that sacrifice. I couldn't help myself. What sacrifice? You've been a full-time marketing director for 8 years, Helen. Helen wouldn't meet my eyes. There were opportunities one didn't pursue because of our marriage. Rachel tapped her pen on the table. Before we discuss this further, we should complete the financial disclosures. There have been some recent developments. Helen shifted in her seat. Was that nervousness I detected? Rachel pulled out a folder. Mark has recently been terminated from his position at Westlake Technologies. Helen's eyes widened in what looked like genuine surprise. You lost your job. When? Tuesday, I said quietly. The same day you handed me divorce papers. Her lawyer frowned. This changes the financial landscape considerably. There's more, Rachel continued, pulling out another document. Mark has also recently been named the beneficiary of his uncle Robert Thompson's estate, valued at approximately $12 million. The room went completely silent. Helen's face drained of color. $12 million, her lawyer repeated, clearly recalculating everything in his head. I watched Helen carefully. The shock on her face seemed genuine, but then something else flickered across her features. Recognition. And then, calculation. When did you find out about this inheritance? Her lawyer asked. Wednesday morning, I answered truthfully. The day after Helen filed for divorce. Helen's lawyer nodded slowly, clearly understanding the implications for their case. Inheritances received after filing were typically separate property. But it was Helen's reaction I was focused on. She was staring at the table, her hands trembling slightly. Helen, I said quietly. Did you know about this before you filed? Her head snapped up. Of course not. How would I know about your estranged uncle's will? Rachel slid another document across the table. This is a record of meetings between Helen and David Keller, an associate at Winters & Associates, the firm handling Robert Thompson's estate. They met 5 times in the month before she filed for divorce. Helen's face went from pale to flushed in seconds. That's not what it looks like. What is it, then? I asked, my heart breaking all over again with the confirmation of my worst fears. Helen looked trapped. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, a silent warning not to speak further. I think, Rachel said into the tense silence, that we should take a break and reconvene when everyone has had time to process this new information. As we stood to leave, Helen grabbed my arm. Mark, please. Let me explain. I looked into the eyes of the woman I'd loved for a decade and saw a stranger. I think your meetings with David Keller explain everything, I said quietly, pulling my arm away. As Rachel and I walked out, I felt hollow but somehow lighter. The truth, even when it hurts, brings its own kind of freedom. Rachel and I didn't speak until we were safely in my car, away from the law office. You okay? She finally asked. I gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. No, but I will be. Her face when I mentioned David Keller. Rachel shook her head. That wasn't the reaction of an innocent person. I know. The confirmation hurt worse than I expected. What happens now? Rachel checked her phone. Helen's already called me 3 times. She'll want to explain, to spin this somehow. Should we hear her out? Rachel considered this. Actually, yes. But on our terms, not hers. We drove to a small restaurant Rachel suggested, neutral territory with enough privacy for what would likely be an uncomfortable conversation. I texted Helen the location, and she agreed to meet us there in an hour. What do you think she'll say? I asked Rachel as we waited. She'll claim she wasn't after your money. That meeting with David was about something else entirely. Rachel sipped her water. The question is whether there's any truth to it. Helen arrived looking like she'd been crying. She sat down across from us, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. This looks cozy, she said bitterly. My husband and my best friend, teamed up against me. We're just looking for the truth, Helen, Rachel replied evenly. Helen's laugh was hollow. The truth. Fine. Yes, I met with David Keller. He's an old friend from college who happens to work at that law firm. And what did you discuss in these meetings? Rachel asked. Helen hesitated. Personal matters. Such as my uncle's inheritance? I pressed. I didn't know it was your uncle specifically, Helen admitted after a long pause. David mentioned that the firm was handling a large estate where the beneficiary didn't know yet. He said the beneficiary was someone connected to me. The admission hung in the air between us. So you filed for divorce before I could find out I was coming into money, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. Before it would become marital property. Helen's eyes flashed. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Explain it to me, Helen. Explain why you decided to end our 10-year marriage the day before I found out about an inheritance. I was unhappy, she burst out. I had been for years. You were so comfortable. So settled. I wanted more from life. More than what I could provide. I quoted her words back to her. She had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't mean it like that. But when you found out there might be money coming my way, you made sure to file quickly, Rachel interjected. Before it could complicate things. Helen's silence was damning. Did you know I was going to lose my job too? I asked quietly. Her head snapped up. No. God, Mark, what kind of person do you think I am? I don't know anymore, I answered honestly. The Helen I thought I knew wouldn't end our marriage over money. It wasn't just about money, she insisted. We were growing apart. You know we were. Maybe she was right. Maybe there had been distance growing between us that I'd been too comfortable to notice. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. If you were so unhappy, why wait until you heard about a potential inheritance to file? Rachel asked. Why not months ago? Or years? Helen looked away. The timing was. I admit it looks bad. It looks calculated, I corrected her. It looks like you were waiting for the perfect moment to leave me with as much as you could get. Helen's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. Fair. I laughed bitterly. Was it fair to end our marriage the same day I lost my job? Was it fair to meet secretly with someone who told you about my inheritance before I knew about it myself? Helen wiped at her eyes. I made a mistake, okay? When David mentioned the inheritance, I panicked. I thought if I waited, everything would get more complicated. So you admit the inheritance was a factor, Rachel pressed. Helen hesitated, then nodded slightly. A factor. Not the only reason. The admission hung between us like a physical thing. 10 years of marriage, reduced to a financial calculation. What would you have done if I'd told you about losing my job before you filed? I asked. Helen looked genuinely uncomfortable. I don't know. Would you have stayed? Out of pity? Or obligation? That's not a fair question, she protested. None of this is fair, I replied. But it's where we are. Rachel cleared her throat. Given what we now know, I think we need to revisit the terms of your settlement offer. It's clearly excessive considering the circumstances. Helen's expression hardened. The inheritance doesn't change the fact that I contributed to our marriage for 10 years. No one's disputing that, Rachel said calmly. But your initial offer asked for significantly more than your contribution warranted, even before we knew about Mark's job loss. I watched Helen's face as she calculated her options. The woman I'd shared a bed with for a decade was suddenly a stranger, weighing the financial pros and cons of fighting me. What do you want, Mark? She finally asked. The truth, I said simply. And a fair ending to what I thought was a good marriage. Helen looked down at her hands. I did love you. For a long time. Just not enough to stay when you thought I was broke. She flinched but didn't deny it. Here's what's going to happen, Rachel interjected, all business now. We're going to draft a new settlement agreement. You'll get your fair share of the marital assets, no more, no less. The inheritance remains Mark's separate property, as the law provides. Helen looked to me, perhaps hoping I'd overrule Rachel, offer something more generous. But the betrayal was still too fresh. It's reasonable, I said. More than reasonable, considering. Helen nodded slowly, defeated. Fine. I'll tell my lawyer. As she stood to leave, she paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry about your job. And I'm glad about your uncle. You deserve something good right now. The words should have meant something, but they rang hollow after everything that had happened. After she left, Rachel and I sat in silence for a moment. "You okay?" she asked again. "No," I admitted. "But I will be." "What are you going to do now? With the inheritance, I mean." I hadn't thought that far ahead. My entire focus had been on understanding Helen's betrayal. "I don't know. Travel maybe. Start over somewhere new." Rachel nodded. "That sounds healthy. What about you?" I asked. "Won't this cause problems between you and Helen?" Rachel's smile was sad but resolute. "Some friendships don't survive the truth. I've made my peace with that." As we left the restaurant, I realized something important had shifted. The pain was still there, but alongside it was something new, a sense of possibility. For the first time in years, my future was entirely my own to shape. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. In the end, Helen accepted a settlement that was fair but far less than her initial demand. The inheritance remained untouched in my accounts, a safety net I hadn't expected but now appreciated more than I could express. Rachel continued to represent me throughout the process, her friendship with Helen effectively over. I learned later that Helen had spread rumors about Rachel's betrayal. But Rachel never complained or seemed to regret her choice. "Some things are more important than old friendships," she told me when I brought it up. "Like doing what's right." The day the papers were signed, I felt strangely empty. 10 years of marriage, reduced to signatures on legal documents. Helen and I barely spoke during the final meeting, the distance between us now complete and irreversible. As we left the courthouse, she paused on the steps. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said, not unkindly. "I hope you do too," I replied, and meant it. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. We had shared too much for that. Rachel and I celebrated that night with dinner at a small Italian restaurant near her office. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for months finally began to lift. "So what now?" Rachel asked as we shared a bottle of wine. "Any big plans for your newfound freedom and fortune?" I had been thinking about this question a lot lately. "Actually, yes. I'm starting a foundation." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "A foundation? For people who lose their jobs unexpectedly. To help them bridge the gap while they find something new." I smiled. Getting fired was the worst thing that ever happened to me, until it led to discovering the truth about my marriage. "That's surprisingly generous, considering everything you've been through." I shrugged. "Maybe that's why. I know what it feels like to have your life fall apart in a single day." Rachel studied me with new interest. "You're not who I expected, Mark Thompson. Is that a good thing?" Her smile was warm. "A very good thing." 6 months after my world collapsed, I found myself standing in the newly opened offices of the Second Chance Foundation. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me, or on Rachel, who had helped with all the legal work to set it up. We had grown closer during those months, our relationship evolving from client and lawyer to friends and eventually to something more. It happened slowly, naturally, both of us cautious after everything we'd been through. On the day of the foundation's opening, Rachel stood beside me as we cut the ribbon. The small crowd of staff and supporters applauded. "How does it feel?" she asked quietly. "Like a new beginning," I replied, squeezing her hand. Later that evening, as we walked along the riverfront near my new apartment, Rachel asked the question that had been hanging between us. "Do you ever regret how things turned out? With Helen, I mean." I considered this carefully. I regret that our marriage wasn't what I thought it was. I regret the years spent with someone who saw me as a means to an end rather than a partner. But I don't regret learning the truth. And I definitely don't regret what came after. Rachel smiled, leaning into me as we watched the sunset reflect off the water. Neither do I. Sometimes life's worst moments lead to unexpected blessings. Losing my job had revealed the truth about my marriage. That painful truth had led me to Rachel. And my uncle's inheritance had given me the means to help others facing similar crises. It wasn't the life I had planned. It was better. As Rachel and I turned to head back, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Jake, my old friend who had been there for me from the beginning. "Saw the news about the foundation. Proud of you, Mun. From rock bottom to changing lives. That's one hell of a comeback story." I smiled, typing back, "Not a comeback. A new beginning." And as Rachel slipped her hand into mine, I knew it was true. The story of my failed marriage and unexpected inheritance wasn't the end of my story. It was just the first chapter of a much better one.